Welcome everyone to this session that I'm calling the business case for accessibility in the age of COVID-19. My name is Mary Hancock, and I am an accessibility L&D consultant with Keypoint Learning. Just a little bit about me. I've been in training and development for 15-ish years now, and I'm just really passionate about helping companies develop their own online accessibility strategy. So with that said, I think I'm just going to jump right into the session, and I am going to turn off my video so you guys can focus on the session and instead of my face. Okay, so 4 topics that I'm going to cover with you during this session. So I'm going to start off by just talking about, answering the question of why even bother? So why should you even care about making your online training accessible? And then we'll talk about the curveball that COVID-19 has thrown all of us in the training world. I'll give you some statistics that you can use if you need to convince your leadership that your training needs to be accessible. And then I'll wrap up by showing you a couple of simple design strategies, accessibility-wise, that you can start incorporating into your online course design right now. So let's talk about understanding people with disabilities and the benefits of creating accessible online courses. And I do think it's one thing to just to sort of try to understand what a disability is. It's something else to try to experience it, even on just the tiniest level. So before we get too deep into this session, I'm going to do a little experiment with you. If you don't mind, if you can close your eyes for a second and just, bear with me, I'll tell you when you can open your eyes again. So hopefully you've all got your eyes closed. And so, okay, so I have changed screens and I'm showing you a different screen now, and hopefully your eyes are still closed. And so this is sort of a rhetorical question because I know you can't answer me if your eyes are closed in chat, but what would you need me to do so that you know what's happening on this screen that you can't see? And what you would need from me is you would need me to explain it and everything on it. And okay, so you could all open your eyes now, and you would need me to say something like this. The title of the slide is Accessible Means, ... There's a cartoon in the middle. There's a group of people in the cartoon. They're trying to get up some steps that are covered with snow. Several people are standing by the steps. One person's waiting in a wheelchair by the ramp. And everyone's waiting while the one man is shoveling the snow out of the way on the steps. And so the guy in the wheelchair says, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" And the guy shoveling the snow says, "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you." And the guy in the wheelchair very wisely says, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." And so now I want you to, okay, so that's the one experiment. And so now I want you to think about this, about what if you couldn't hear me? What would you need on the screen to be able to understand what I'm saying? And the answer to that, of course, is that you'd need everything on the screen to be readable, including the description of the cartoon. And so I hope that as we go through the session today, you will think about what it feels like from the experiment that we just did, what that felt like. Imagine what it would feel like not to be able to walk or to use your hands to eat, let alone use a mouse for computer navigation. And so in my mind, what accessible means is if you clear the path for the users with special needs, you will clear the path for everyone. Okay, so I have a quick poll for everyone. What percentage of adults in the US do you think have some type of disability? And Matt, I think we can go ahead and start the poll. Beautiful. And so just answer what you think the answer might be: 10%, 15, 20, or 25%. And Matt, I'll let you decide when you think it might be about time to switch over. Very good. Okay. So somewhere between 20, it looks like most people think 20%, and the next highest answer is 25%. Okay, very good. I think I'm going to blow your minds here a bit. I'm going to close this poll. The answer is 25%. And that is according to the CDC. So according to the CDC, that's 1 in 4. 1 in 4 Americans has some type of disability, as defined by the CDC, and that's about 61 million adults. And the corollary to that is that in your own organization, if that statistic holds true, and I imagine it probably does, then it's pretty likely that as many as 1 in 4 of your employees likely has some kind of disability. And so you're looking at a good 25% of your workforce. And okay, so here are the implications of that. As we all know, there's a pandemic going on, and most companies have experienced some sort of layoffs and furloughs. And I think it's safe to say that face-to-face training is it's a thing of the past, at least for a while. And so we have most companies rushing to move their training online in response to the pandemic, and they should. This is the smart thing to do because training has to go on regardless of whether it's face-to-face or if it's online. However, if companies don't take this opportunity as they're converting their training from instructor-led to online, if they don't take this opportunity to add some accessible features now while they're converting, then they risk losing up to 25% of their workforce. And that's on top of the ones that have already been laid off or furloughed. And then the company is going to be in a position where they have to spend more budget to replace them. And as we all know, budget, it's in short supply these days. I mean, replacing people is expensive. I think we in training, we've always known that. It's especially true now. I've got this is the business case that I told you I would give you. And so I've given you this simple example, and you can use this and adapt it to your own business if you need to make a case for accessibility with your leadership. So these statistics come from SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. And so according to SHRM, it takes about 6 to 9 months of salary to replace and train one lost employee. And depending on which organization you're looking at, sometimes the numbers are a little different, but on average, you can say 6 to 9 months of salary. And so say if we take someone who makes 36,000 a year, just to keep the math simple, that's about 3,000 a month. Times 6 or 9 months, we're looking at a good $18,000 to $27,000 just to replace that one employee. And that's going to be hard to do when companies are already stretched. And I just want to hammer this point home again. Please remember, if you remember nothing else from this session, if you clear the path for special users, then you clear the path for everyone. And converting your training online at this time should help your organization succeed. It should not make the situation worse. Okay, I've got another question, and this one you can answer in chat. So I mentioned disabilities a bit. And so what kinds of disabilities do you think we're talking about? So I'll give everyone a moment. Just what do you think? Any ideas? Yeah, all of them, right? Audio, visual, learning disabilities. Yep. Physical disabilities, ADHD. Yeah, you guys are great. Absolutely. You're exactly right. It's all of these. Absolutely. Um, it's some of the ones that are maybe more obvious, and maybe some that aren't quite as obvious. So disabilities like blindness, so low vision, or someone who's colorblind, someone who is either deaf or hard of hearing, someone who has mobility issues, like someone maybe who's in a wheelchair because of an accident or something like maybe cerebral palsy. Uh, there could also be speech impediments or just being unable to speak. Could be cognitive disorders, attention deficit, dyslexia, memory, problem solving, attention. And it could be even other neural disorders, like someone who has seizures or MS, something like that. And it's also important to keep in mind that people can have combinations of these disabilities. And sometimes you know someone has a disability, it's recognizable, and other times it's not. You may not even know. And I've noticed myself, for example, I'm starting to kind of hit the combination of some of these accessibility needs. I know my vision is not what it used to be. I catch myself using the Zoom a lot, way more than I used to, in making text bigger on screen. And my husband would absolutely attest that I'm getting to be a little more hard of hearing than I used to be. I'm getting to where I really like to have the closed captioning turned on when I'm watching a movie these days. And I imagine I'm not the only one. And so most of us might, even if it's temporary, might have some sort of accessibility need at some point in our lives. And and it because so many of us are working remotely nowadays because of the pandemic, there's even more to consider. You may have to consider that you may have employee groups that may not be considered a traditional accessibility need, that can push that 25% even higher. So you might have someone with a temporary disability, like a broken arm or a repetitive motion injury. I know for myself, if I'm really pushing myself on the keyboard and the mouse, then I have a repetitive motion injury that will flare up sometimes. And I think those of us who have been building online training for a while, we we sort of know the internet connection of the office, right? We kind of know that the building might have a pretty strong internet connection. But now we've got so many people working at home that we have to consider that they have different internet speeds. So we might have someone with a slow connection at home. And then there could also just be noise. Um, if you're working in a noisy environment, maybe there are kids in the background, or you got dogs barking. I can think of all kinds of situations where the environment at home is not as ideal for learning as it could be. And so, what this means is that we may all have to rethink our usual training strategy a bit in response to the pandemic. Uh, for example, I love drag and drops. I love building drag and drops. I do it all the time. I think they're really versatile. You can have learners categorize things, move things around, put them in different order. I think it's a really useful tool for learning. But someone who has trouble using the mouse to drag objects is going to get really frustrated with my drag and drop activity. And so I may need to find another option that will still provide a comparable learning experience. So I might use something like a hotspot activity instead. And the point that I'm hoping to drive home is down here in the bottom right-hand corner. If you can create training that's interesting and engaging, and it works for the 25% of your employees with accessibility needs, it will work for the other 75% too. And just to give you a taste of how difficult it can be to use a computer if you have some sort of disability, after the conference today, I want you to try to perform this very classic challenge. It's called the No Mouse Challenge, and some of you may have done it before. But I want you to try to perform your regular job for 15 minutes. That's all the torture I'm going to put you through. 15 minutes using just your keyboard, and the mouse is totally off limits. I suspect you're going to get frustrated pretty quickly. I know I have when I've tried to do this challenge before. And I want you to remember that feeling when you're creating online training. You don't want your learners to experience that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to touch on the guidelines a bit, the current guidelines, mainly to reassure you that everything I'm talking about today does align with Section 508 and with the World Wide Web Consortium. So there are a couple of tongue twisters with the names of some of the standards. So I'll try not to stumble over them too much. And I want to give you just a real quick history lesson. So as I'm sure you all know, Section 508 was a law that was passed in the 70s, and it required federal departments and agencies to be accessible to people with disabilities. There are certainly plenty of private corporations that maybe might, if they have any sort of relationship with the federal government, they might also be required to be Section 508 compliant. But it's meant to be for federal departments and agencies. And for decades, that was it. That was the only standard. In 1999, the W3C, that's the World Wide Web Consortium, developed the WCAG standards. You're going to hear it sometimes just called Weekag for short. It's just a little easier. And it stands for World Consortium Accessibility Guidelines. So you just call it Weekag. The Weekag standards developed in 1999 were similar to Section 508, but they weren't identical. Then in 2008, there was a pretty extensive update to Weekag, and that was a 2.0 standard. And it was at that point that Section 508, they liked the 2.0 standards so much that they aligned all of their checklists with the Weekag 2.0 standard. And so what that means is if your company is following the 2.0 standard developed in 2008, you are in essence Section 508 compliant as well. Now, there was another update just a couple of years ago in 2018, not quite as extensive as an update, but there was one. And so that's the current standard. And I don't know this for a fact, so don't hold me to it, but I imagine that Section 508 will align with that one as well at some point. And so that's as deep as I'm going to go into, sort of the history lesson of Weekag versus Section 508. If you want this PowerPoint after the session, then you'll see I've given you a couple of links here that will give you more detail than you ever wanted to know about the two different standards. And how they align. So I'll leave these here for you for if you want this PowerPoint presentation. I am, though, briefly, I thought I might just briefly give you a bit more of an in-depth dive into Weekag. I don't want you to get overwhelmed by this slide. I know there's a lot of numbers and a lot of text, but I just want to give you a sense of what's in Weekag, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I could probably do an entire session on just this one slide. And I did also give you a link down here that's got the full description of everything that's on this slide. So I'll just give you kind of the brief tour of Weekag. So there are a series of principles, guidelines, and success criteria within Weekag, and how well your company aligns with these is what determines your conformance level. And you could either be an A, that's the lowest level, a double A, that's the middle, or triple A, the very top. And so they all sort of flow very nicely down to the conformance level. The 4 guiding principles, you will hear them characterized by the acronym POUR. And that is that your training needs to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And in the simplest definitions I can give you, perceivable is that it's easy to perceive, easy to see. Operable, it's easy to use. Understandable, easy to understand, so maybe simple language, for example. And robust refers to assistive technologies. So, for example, can your course be completely run with a keyboard and for someone who can't use a mouse? That's an example of robust. Whoops, hit too fast. And so after you've got your 4 guidelines, then, principles, then each one of those principles breaks out into 13 guidelines. And I didn't put them all here just because they just won't all fit, but I pulled in a couple of them just so you can get a flavor for them. And so it's pretty obvious things like you want to provide text alternatives, and large print is one example of that. And if you've got media like video or audio, that you provide closed captioning, that your navigation is simple, that it's not confusing, and it's predictable. So maybe like the home button is always in the same place. Simple layout, plenty of color contrast for people with low vision, and maybe keyboard accessible, and so that, and there are a few others which you can absolutely read through in more detail with this link. And then for each one of the guidelines, there might be 3 or 4 success criteria. And the success criteria each have a label. They're either the A, the double A, or the triple A. And how many of these you conform to is what determines your conformance level. Okay, that's all the painful numbers and letters and conformance and criteria I'm going to give you. I did just want to go over this with you briefly, and the main reason is that I want to again reassure you that everything I'm talking about today 100% aligns with the principles, the guidelines, and the success criteria in the standards. Okay, hopefully your eyes aren't crossed after looking at that slide. One more chat question for you. So I've touched on assistive technologies. I mentioned the keyboard, for example. What are some other examples of assistive technologies that you've either heard about or used yourself, or maybe needed to try to build training for? Let's see what you come up with. Closed captioning, text-to-speech, screen readers. Yes, absolutely. Excellent. Yeah. I mean, it can be anything from, screen readers, Braille displays, screen magnifiers, that's one that I like to use a lot. Closed captions, transcripts. Have you ever thought about providing a downloadable transcript that learners could print ahead of time so they could follow along? That can be helpful. Joysticks, speech recognition software. I love a speech recognition software program called Dragon. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it, but I love it. So when my repetitive motion injury is kind of acting up, I'll switch over to Dragon and I can use it to dictate and keep working. There are even breathing devices, or there are a lot of different options. I mean, and technically, even glasses, if you wear glasses, that's actually an assistive technology too. So lots of options out there. And so, okay, if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed when you saw that one slide with all the numbers and the principles and the guidelines and success criteria, I hope you won't be. I didn't want to overwhelm you. The good news is you don't have to do all of that immediately. You can just work on your accessibility strategy in stages until you get to where your company needs to be. And you can just sort of start with that low level, institute a couple of features like maybe closed captioning or transcripts, and just work on that till you get there. And then you can even decide, does it make sense for your company to continue to move up to the other levels? There isn't the Weekag police. No one's going to track you down and put you in jail if you're taking a while to get your strategy off the ground. So it's at your own pace, at your company's pace, and it's truly you can truly take it in stages. And so I'm going to give you some sort of low-hanging fruit features that you can incorporate now as you convert. So I'm going to show you how to do closed captioning and storyline. It's super easy. I love it. It looks great. I can't say enough about how great the closed captioning feature is in storyline. And then I'm also going to show you how to add a transcript to the player in storyline that you could provide for download for learners, either ahead of time or even after the fact. So I am going to exit out of this. And now I'm going to switch over to Storyline. If you're not that familiar with Storyline, that's okay. There are, you can do closed captioning in Captivate. You can do it in a couple of different kinds of programs. I just happen to really like the Storyline feature, so I thought I would show you that one. So, okay, so I've got 2 slides here set up for you. I'm going to do a closed captioning, show you how that works. And then I'm also going to show you how to add a transcript to the player. So the 4 steps that we're going to go through for closed captioning, I'll show you how to turn on the closed captioning feature in the player. And then I'll show you how to generate a text-to-speech file in Storyline. Love that feature. And then we can create the closed captioning notes using that text-to-speech file. And then I'll show you how to sync it to the narration. So, okay, so turn on the closed captioning notes. So if you go up to the player, go back to home. It's real easy to turn on closed captioning. All you have to do is look under controls and click captions. It's that simple. There you go. You can see C notes pop up. And I'm in the modern player. but it's very similar if you were using the classic player. I like the classic player also. So that's that. Your closed captioning is turned on. And now we're going to generate some text to speech. If you look, I did this ahead of time. If you go into the notes area, it's one of the things I love about Storyline is it kind of looks like PowerPoint. So if you're used to PowerPoint, you're about half of the way there already. And so I used this notes area, just like what you have in PowerPoint, and I typed out 2 sentences. And these are just 2 sentences that I pulled from a project management course that I built a couple of years ago. And all you need to do once you've got it in there, go to Insert, Audio, Text to Speech, copy from slide notes. Love this. Just pops it in there. Click Insert. Okay. Now we have a text to speech file. So if you look at the timeline, you'll see there it is. There's your audio file. And now to create the CC notes, just make sure you've got your text to speech file selected. Oh, go away. Go to Options, Edit Captions. And there it is. So Storyline does its level best to guess what you want. And so it does most of the work for you. You may have to wordsmith and move things around a little bit to sync it up, but it's pretty close. So here's your audio text to speech file. So those are my 2 sentences. It gives you a preview of what it's going to look like. And then you've got your 3 boxes here. And you can add more boxes. So if you wanted to split a caption, if you wanted to wordsmith this text, sometimes it doesn't pull it over exactly. But it can, however you want to wordsmith this, then you can. If you wanted to move this around a bit.
Process. So naturally you need to know the activities that occur within that process.
If you wanted to move this over a bit, if you wanted it to appear a little bit later, it's very user-friendly. And it looks pretty good the way it is. I think it sounds okay. And so I'm just going to leave it like it is. Click Save and Close. Okay. And then we can listen to it. So I am going to preview this one slide. And I'll have to hit CC notes real quickly so I can turn it on. It's just one of the way it works.
Being a project manager is more than selecting team members and scheduling meetings.
Doesn't that look nice?
In our organization, all projects follow a standard project management process, so naturally you need to know the activities that occur within that process.
I think it looks great. It very much looks like what I've gotten used to seeing in a movie on my own television. And I think that's something that your learners are really going to like. And it's just that easy. A couple of tips for you on closed captioning. This is something it took me a bit to learn. So if you're just getting started with closed captioning, I'm hoping that I might be able to save you some pain and heartache. The closed captioning, like I only did 2 sentences and in 1 slide, but you can imagine if you've got 50 slides, that it's going to take a little bit of work. You know, you have to go in and generate your text speech and generate your notes and sync it. And sometimes Storyline doesn't hear exactly what the text to speech is saying. So you may have to kind of do some wordsmithing. And then if you send that out to, say you have a subject matter expert, 3 or 4 subject matter experts looking at it, and they're still wordsmithing the closed captioning, like they want to change the script, then it's sort of a waste of time for you to spend all that time syncing up your closed captioning. And then the SME goes and changes the script on you. So that's basically time wasted. So take it from me. What I would recommend, do the closed captioning for like the first 5 slides, maybe. That's it. So your SMEs get a sense of how it looks and how it functions. And then I wouldn't do anymore. I would let them know ahead of time that you're not going to do it anymore until they've completely nailed down the script. And then if you're going to set it out to, if either you're going to re-record with an actual voice of your own voice, or if you're going to send it out to a professional maybe, then it's better to just wait and get all of the changes out of the way, and then go add the closed captioning to your pristine, polished audio. And it's easy enough to do. So all you would have to do is right click on your text to speech file, replace audio, find your pretty polished narration that you're replacing the text to speech with, and then you'll need to be sure to go back into the closed captioning and just resync it, because whoever's voice it is going to be slightly different from the text to speech. You might have to do a little resyncing. And that's that on closed captioning. So pretty easy. Now, if you want to make a transcript available for download, that is really helpful to your learners, so they could either follow along with you. I know Storyline has, so it could just be a straight script, like a Word document turned into a PDF. Or you could, I know Storyline has a feature where you can spit out a pretty nice looking version of the course with small screenshots and all the text in the notes area. So it depends on how fancy you want to make the transcript, but it's pretty easy to add. So 2 steps, you're going to add a transcript tab to the player, and then you just add a simple trigger to open the file. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to go to the player. And there's already a resource tab. You can just as easily use that, but I'll just show you how to add a new one just in case. So click Add. I'm going to call it Transcript. And then you have to give it a trigger so Storyline knows what to do. And so instead of jump to slide, we're going to change that. We're going to change it to open. We want to open a file. And then just search for your file. I've already got one created for you. I just called it transcript. And it's just going to be those couple of sentences that I created on the previous slide. Open. Click OK. Okay. And then there it is. So you can see there's your transcript tab. So you can see what the preview is going to look like. And I'll click OK. Now, if I were to try to preview this slide, it wouldn't actually show you what it looked, how it's going to function. You have to actually, if you're going to click, link to an outside file or link to an outside web address or something like that, you're going to need to publish. And so I've already done that for you, so you can see what it looks like. So here's the published version. There is your transcript tab, and if you click it, voila. It opens up the PDF in a separate tab. And then your learner can, they can make it bigger if they want. They can print it. They can download a copy. They can do whatever they want with it. And that is the transcript. So easy enough. All you have to do is add a transcript tab to the player and then add a trigger to open the file. So now I'm going to pop back over to PowerPoint and open it up for questions. So what questions do you have for me? So Matt, if you've been able to maybe monitor, have there been any questions that have popped up, or maybe now that you guys have gotten to the end of the session, that sparked another question for you? So give you a few minutes to answer questions. Look at the.
Well, we
chat
do
up
have
here.
2 questions about the
Yeah.
pricing of things. Tamerson would like to know the pricing on Dragon, and Kang would like to know the pricing on Storyline.
Let's see. Trying to dig back into my memory because I bought each of these programs a while ago. Um, I think Dragon was not cheap, so I think it was around $1,000 or like $8.99 or $9.99. Sometimes they run specials. It has been worth every cent for me. I can use Dragon to do mouse clicks. I can drag with Dragon. I can use it to dictate. I can do everything that I can do with my mouse or the keyboard. I can use with Dragon. So it's really, really great. Sometimes I think they have discounts, like student discounts, but that never did apply to me when I was purchasing it. So I think it's somewhere around $8.99 or $9.99, something like that. You can double check and find out for sure. Storyline, Articulate has a couple of different options. So of course there's Storyline, there's Rise, and there are a couple different Articulate products. And I can't remember the price off the top of my head. I'm going to guess it was somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000, but don't take my word for it. If you go to articulate.com, they've got the pricing tab. It's a software, so they make it real easy for you to find the pricing on it. Is the closed captioning and Storyline a compliant size? Captivate gives me a warning if I go below 14 or 18. Yeah, that is a great question. The out-of-the-box closed captioning on Storyline is a little bit small. And so I like to increase the font size. And you don't do it by point like you do in Captivate. It's a percentage. And the version that I was showing you a moment ago, I think I've jacked that up to 200%. So it's about twice as big. So you may have to eyeball it a little bit to see if you think it's as big as what you have in Captivate. The one drawback with closed captioning, not really a drawback, just something to be mindful of in Storyline. As you increase the size of the closed captioning, you also increase the size of your player controls. So like your next button and your previous button. And so I've got to where I abbreviate. So I'll use PREV for previous. Most people know what that is. And then next, you can't really abbreviate that too much, I guess. And so, yeah, it makes everything a little bit bigger. I have no doubt there's a way to hack through that, but I am always really hesitant to start hacking the code on programs like this. I try to stick with the native functionality. Let's see, what else? I'm kind of digging through to see what else might have come up. Yep. Okay. It looks like that may be it. Did I miss any questions? Matt, do you see anything I might have missed?
No, that looks like you got everything, and with just under a minute to spare too. So this is perfect timing, Mary.
Wonderful. Well, then I might just maybe briefly say, I'm going to switch slides. There's so much out there. There's so many resources out there. And I've given you a few to get you started. So if you want the PowerPoint presentation, there are checklists, there's compliance standards, accessibility guidelines. I've even given you an automated testing tool that you can try out if you're wanting to just confirm that your course is accessible. And so there's a couple of options there for you. And so if there are no other questions, then I just want to thank everyone for being in this session today. If you have any questions, so if you think of anything after the fact that you forgot to ask, as I was throwing a lot of information at you today, My email is here. You're more than welcome to drop me an email, give me a phone call. I love talking about this stuff. I'm really passionate about it. And I would love to have any questions that you think of afterwards.